not least, this is a point that may not always be possible, but I'll put it this way. If I go to an international tournament, I try to make sure I arrive a day early so that I will be speaking English a whole day before I've actually come to the debating part of the tournament. And if I can't do that, or if I do that but that's not enough, I would also make sure I'm speaking English within my contingency. I know it's very tempting to go to your own language. Sometimes it's like, yay, this is my relaxed time, I can finally speak Hebrew. But at the same time, again, it takes a long time to jumpstart your English. And I think if you started off by speaking with your partner in English, if you decide between the two of you, we are only going to speak English amongst ourselves, it is usually very beneficial. By the time you come to the debate, you've already been speaking English quite a while. English is more fluent. We often talk about, I'm sorry, I'm missing a word in English, shlifa. Draw. Like, okay, so here's the thing. You have this, we have what we call passive and active English. So there are words which, obviously, if I came across in a book, I would know what they mean, but I don't necessarily know how to use them. And your active English is, the vocabulary is much bigger the more you speak English. So if I've activated my English nowadays, like Will and John have came to stay with me 2 days ago, so I've now been speaking English for 3 days. My English now is a lot more fluent than it was on the first day they were here. And this is also very beneficial in terms of debates, not even in the terms of a particular debate. So I do recommend you work on your English and start speaking English even before the tournament starts. That's basically like the practical tools issue, which is very short and very brief. Now we come to the more interesting part, and that is the strategies. And the first thing that I'm going to say, I'm going to sound incredibly patronizing, but I think part of being a good debater is to know your strengths and weaknesses. First mistake I see ESL speakers do, strategically wise, is they try too much. So they try to compete with the Brits in their speed. That's just never going to happen. Okay, you are never ever going to be able to speak as fast as them. You also have to be realistic in that sense in how many arguments you're going to squeeze. I always love it when someone gets up on a second proposition and says, well, I'm going to have 6 arguments for this extension. My first argument is going to be this. Now, if you're from Oxford, you could actually construct 6 arguments in an extension. I've seen that happen. If you're ESL, there aren't that many chances you will be. You don't speak as fast. You're not as fluent. You get stuck more. Be realistic in how much material you're going to be able to deliver in a persuasive manner in a speech. And prioritize your speech accordingly. Because often what would happen is you're just not going to make your last 3 arguments, and those were the ones that were supposed to win you the debate. So you need to know your strength in terms of you're not going to be able to speak as fast as them. You're not going to have the same amount of material. So how do you beat them then? There comes the points of depth of analysis. If you have only 2 arguments, but those 2 are A, precisely on clash, and B, extremely developed, you will win the debate, no matter how many other arguments they have. And I think if you invest more in your depth of analysis than in how many arguments can I make, you will usually overtake EPL teams. And what I'd like to do now is just have a brief exercise to show like the way depth of analysis works. So can I have 3 volunteers, please? Jonathan, oh, and let's have someone not from Israel do this. I'm looking at you. Okay, come on. Okay, so what we're going to do is very, very simple. It's a really simple public speaking exercise. It works this way. I'm going to give Jonathan a motion. Jonathan needs to speak for a minute about an argument in that that you would run in that debate with the spirit of that motion. I then want O to take one aspect of that 1 minute speech and speak about that for a minute. I then want Rahul to take one aspect of Or's point and elaborate on that for a minute. So what we see is you can make the argument at different levels of analysis. So, Jonathan, tell me why we want to do capital punishment. Let's go very, very basic.
I believe the capital punishment needs to be enforced in every country because there are some criminals that you just don't get to repent. There are some crimes that are so bad, they're so unbelievable, inhumane, that the only thing that's suitable for their crime is to be dead. We take them out of our society because we don't want them never to come back to our society. And then half a minute. The second thing that it's important to think in capital punish, that if you don't take the beautiful American system, it can be much cheaper. And I'm not talking about economics. The thing that I am talking about is justice. I see that as a society, I won't give food, I won't give shelter for someone that is so inhumane. And 7 seconds. And I believe that the third thing is to show everybody. If you do something, thank you.
Okay, so Anat talked about a bit of the effect of justice. We want to use capital punishment as justice. I will try to explain why what are the moral grounds we are standing on. Because justice is a nice title, but we want to specifically show what moral grounds are we standing on. The fact is that the state is executing someone is not just like a normal person shooting or murdering. The state is the sum of all its citizens, and it's supposed to represent its citizens, and that's the only way, as a whole, as a society, we can inflict punishment on someone that has done wrong and hasn't played by the rules of that society. Now, not only that, we have the moral grounds because as the government we are representing the people, we have the moral grounds because in that way we are protecting the people. We are encouraging other people, for other criminals from doing the same crime again in the future because they know the price is the ultimate price.
Okay, so I'll go in depth with regards to protecting the people in moral grounds. Now, what basically happens in such an issue is, I'll backtrack and show how this point correlates to the first point in question. Now, a government is there, a government is in position to protect the rights of a person or protect the rights of its citizens for that matter. Now, what does it need to do for that? So this basically leads to the argument that if something has gone out of code which the government has set for a person of that, for the well-being of a person of that country, that needs to be rectified. So how is it more or less rectified? It's rectified to an extent through justice, which to an extent is brought about by punishment. Now, punishment is to an extent developed from an argument of, you could say to an extent of retribution as well as of not letting that incident occur again. So basically what the argument more or less boils down to is that since it's a government's prerogative to protect the people of the nation, capital punishment to an extent will act as a very good hindrance to them up.
Okay, so I thank all of my little helpers here. So what did we have from Jonathan? What we have from Jonathan was what we often have in debates, which is like the first part, shooting in all directions. Jonathan basically gave us 2 and a quarter concepts. So we basically first of all had the whole, they're evil people, we don't want them in our society. And we secondly had the concept of this is just because I shouldn't pay for their living and I shouldn't support them because they're that evil people. We then had O, who chose to focus on what aspect?
Justice.
Yes, but that was classically, I'm going to use the same phrase, I'm going to actually talk about something completely different, in case you haven't noticed. Because O's concept of justice was rather different than that of Jonathan. O said, the justice that I'm talking about is the fact that the state's role is to protect the people, and in that sense, by killing those murderers, making sure they don't do it again, perhaps deterring future murderers, is the best way in which I, as the government, can protect the people. Rahul then decided to tie even more closely what all has just said with the notion of justice. Talk about who the government actually owes more to, which I think is a very nice way of saying it. So, and I think it's also a nice way of combining Jonathan's second point with O's point, because what you basically said is, okay, so at the end of the day, I have 2 players here. I have the criminal and I have society. And the question is, who should I protect more? And obviously it's society. But the question is also, what do I owe the criminal versus what do I owe society? I think in that sense, what Rahul did was sort of combine the 2 ideas. I think, however, and this will lead me on to my next point in terms of strategy, that often what is very, very useful to do in this sort of debates, and I honestly have to say I do that from the 15 minutes of prep time, is think about what are the basic assumptions in this debate and how do I prove them. Because when you go for basic assumptions, and even if you're second half to a very good team in the first half, they're usually relying on certain things. And if you're able to then deeply construct those basic assumptions, you're basically able to say, well, everything that first prop just did relies on us, therefore we brought the essential part to the debate, they don't stand without us, we win. Also, and this is also important again in terms of specifically being ESL, if you are discussing basic assumptions, you are likely to cover almost all the key terms and concepts that are in the debate, because these are the basic ideas that lie in the debate. And it's because of that that often, even if someone steals your argument, you're able to later push it further. So I think that talking about basic assumptions is always a useful strategy. I also think in terms of depth of analysis, if you look at the idea of, I'm going to take one player in this debate and analyze it thoroughly. So if I wanted to take Jonathan's first point, for example, and talk about it, I would talk about, okay, so what kind of people do we execute? What have they done? Why, for example, what they have done deprives them of the definition of being human? I'd say that the person who is able, not just willing, but actually able to kill another person is no longer human. I will say that to each and every one of us, we have barriers to action. I might hate Julie very, very much, but I don't just slap her. And the reason I don't just slap her is because I'm human, I have these barriers for actions, I have been socially constructed by the human society that you don't just do that, all these sort of stuff. So the kind of person that actually kills another person is no longer a person in my view. Because he's no longer a person, he's as heinous as Jonathan has described, and it is because of that that he doesn't therefore anymore deserve the rights that we grant other people, and therefore the state is legitimate in executing him. So I take one player in the debate and I thoroughly analyze the case, and if I do that, again in sufficient depth, that is often enough in order for me to win the debate. It is also enough to very clearly differentiate me from other teams in that debate, which is also very, very useful. Any questions on depth of analysis? Yes.
One thing. Is it useful as a strategy to tell the judge or the adjudicator as to what are you trying to do? As in, like at the beginning when I started, I basically said that I will be picking.
Yes,
this
it is. I will get to
relate
that.
this.
Yes, it is. I will get to that. Okay. Next one that I'm going to say is a mean point, but something that needs to be pointed out. Okay, so often we have teams who, and this is not a strategy I recommend, this is not a strategy I like, I always coach people not to do that, but obviously some people do it, so it's worth mentioning. We have the repackaging strategy, which means I haven't been able to come up with new arguments, I'm going to repackage everything that was said in the first half. You're never ever going to be able to repackage an EPL team very, very well. In all likelihood, and often it happens, it so be the case, they repackage your arguments, and because they sound better, it sounds better. It is very annoying, but the thing is, you need, as a second team in a debate where there are lots of EPL teams, to be different than them. You cannot just pick a point in their argument and talk about it, because often it will be portrayed as repackaging, and like I said, because they sound better, their analysis is going to prevail. What you can do, I will talk about it later, is differentiate yourself from them within that analysis. But I think often it is advisable to just pick a different direction. If there is something that is relevant to the clash and haven't been discussed, it is better to cover that than it is to pick a point that has already been discussed in the debate.